So Sony's State of Play event is supposed to be taking place on June 4th, and the start time varies depending on, I guess, what region of America you're in, or what region of whatever country you're in. Like if you're in America, it's supposed to start at 2 p.m. specific time. If you live in like New York or the eastern part of America, it's still supposed to start at 5. If you live in like the central part of America, it's supposed to start at 11 p.m. and it's supposed to run over 40 minutes. And there's a lot of anticipation as to what's going to appear at the event. A lot of people are expecting Resident Evil 9 to be showcased by Capcom. A lot of people are also expecting a brand new Final Fantasy game to be showcased tomorrow as well. And that game, a lot of people have been buzzing about it, is Final Fantasy Tactics from 1997. And the reason why people have been talking about that is because this is something that has been teased since 2021. And the director of Final Fantasy Tactics, Yatsumi Matsuno, pretty much he had reposted the PlayStation State of Play announcement, and then he had deleted it right after that on his social media. So it kind of like, just it buzzes up everything, and it makes people think that, oh, maybe, this is kind of a hint or a clue that Final Fantasy Tactics, the remake, is going to appear at tomorrow's State of Play event. And a lot of people are hoping that is the case because Final Fantasy Tactics from 97 was something that was highly underrated. And it's a bit shocking that this game didn't get a remake like back in 2017, or like a modern day current generation remake, 10, I won't say 10 years ago, but back in 2017, because it's been more than 20 years since that game has been released. In fact, I think it's been more than 25 years since that game was released on the OG PlayStation console back in 97. And I feel like it's one of those games that didn't get as much recognition as it deserved because of the year it came out. And there were so many high profile video games that came out back in 1997. I believe Final Fantasy VII came out that year. That ended up being one of the best selling games on the PS1. I think Gran Turismo also came out back in 97. And there was also a couple of high profile video games that came out back in 97. But Final Fantasy Tactics, if anything, was more of a spin off game. And as far as like overall sales, honestly, it did really poorly. And I think in terms of lifetime sales, it was reported like back in 2011 that it did like 2.4 million sales worldwide. And I don't think like the game was released in North America until '98, because I think the Japanese version of Final Fantasy Tactics came out in the summer of '97. But even then, it's like there were so many big titles that came out during the late '90s for the PS1, to a point where a lot of people weren't really thinking about Final Fantasy Tactics. And I feel like it was a pretty fun game that appealed to a niche audience of gamers at the time. And um and I feel like it's something that I don't know, it doesn't get enough credit for, I guess, for how challenging it was, and just how much was like how much was available like in the game in terms of content. You had a turn-based combat game and an expansive job system. It required you to be like really strategic in terms of dealing with challenging battles. And honestly, the music of the game was awesome as well. And people feel like that game, for the most part, was one that probably would have been better off on like maybe the SNES for the most part. Because I feel like this game, like if that game had came out like back in like 1995 or something like that on the SNES, it's quite possible that would have ended up being more popular than it was on the PlayStation 1 console back in the late 90s. But obviously, the SNES, there was definitely a lot of limits to the console and the hardware and all that other stuff that probably would have affected the overall quality of the game itself. But I do feel like Final Fantasy Tactics should have gotten like a remake for the PlayStation 3 or the PlayStation 4 like many years ago. But but if the rumors are true about this game getting a remake for the PlayStation 5, that's awesome. But at the same time, it tells me that Square Enix basically reeks of desperation at this point because they have lost millions of dollars on failed video games. And honestly, I feel like Final Fantasy Tactics in this day and age has the potential to sell more than Final Fantasy 16 did when it came out back in 2023 because at least with Final Fantasy Tactics, it's something that came out during a time period where the series was still white hot for the most part and where I guess there were more casuals paying attention to the franchise in general because like I said, this game came out the same year as Final Fantasy VII, and I feel like during that time period, more people were invested in the series as a whole. And like I said, in the past, I feel like after the early 2000s, um, I guess casuals just stopped paying attention to the Final Fantasy series altogether to a point where basically we are where we are right now. And it seemed like Final Fantasy 15 temporarily it temporarily had saved the series and it kind of put the franchise back in the spotlight. But, at this point, it feels like Final Fantasy 16 is an afterthought. But Final Fantasy Tactics, I do feel that this is a game that definitely deserves a remake. And I hope it's done in a way where it's something that it's not too challenging to, I guess, casuals. Hopefully, the learning curve is something that they'll be able to easily adapt to and all that stuff. But I feel like it's a very fun game that'll probably diminish how challenging it is, and that's assuming if the rumors are true and we are indeed getting this remake for the PlayStation 5. I'm certainly hoping that is definitely the case because Square Enix definitely has to do something to start appealing to casuals more. They have to bring back lapsed fans of the Final Fantasy series because I feel like a lot of people nowadays don't care about the series as much as they did like 15 or 20 or 25 years ago. And I feel like if Final Fantasy Tactics, the remake, is done right and done in a way where it grabs the attention of this current generation of gamers, along with bringing back like lapsed fans of the late '90s or what have you. I do feel like this game has the potential to be a massive commercial success. It could sell more than Final Fantasy 16. It can definitely do better than it did the first time it came out on the PS1.